Hey there, and welcome to the Dynamics Hot Dish Podcast, serving up stories and knowledge on Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform. This is what's hot in Dynamics. You're now joining Merlin Schweiger, Liz McGlennon, and Ashley Steiner.
So we're talking about our favorite Wave 2 features.
And I think favorite is such a fun term for this one, because I don't know about you guys, but I was really underwhelmed about what was coming.
But the view editor is cool.
Merlin, tell us about the view editor, since you stole my favorite new feature.
So there's a button, and you can click the button, and then you can just add columns right to the view, and you can move them around, and it's amazing and wonderful. And then you got to go dig to find the spot where you could save it if you wanted to keep it, which
can you save it? That's what I was wondering.
Apparently you can. I struggled with this for a while, and then my friendly coworker was like, no, you can just do it over here, but you got to through the menu, save view as. And I was like, okay, if you're going to add a button to adjust the columns, and it's a little button for columns, a little button for filters. As soon as I adjust the columns and it shows the little star, why isn't there just a save as button? Why would you not add that button too?
That's what I was wondering, because I'm I feel that I didn't realize you could go save it somewhere else. I was that's the big issue of why people would still use advanced find would be to save the view. But if that's possible, it's almost truly a real replacement.
Yeah, but you just
I've never heard Merlin get so passionate about something. Merlin is yelling over the save.
It makes sense. It shouldn't be hidden.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I'm yelling about this because this is literally what I did. I was like, oh, cool. The Wave 2 feature. Oh, look, I can adjust the columns. Oh, this is sweet. Oh, I wanted to add this column to this view. Now, where do I save it? Hello? Save? That was me. And then I was angry.
I can tell, Merlin.
But it's still an exciting improvement, and I bet they'll add a save button there in a more convenient spot eventually.
We can hope.
It just makes me think of this time when I was talking to my account manager at Microsoft, and I was like, yeah, the problem with our service team using dashboards is that they don't automatically refresh. They have to go up and actually click the refresh button for new things to appear. And he just started laughing. And I was like, why are you laughing? He's like, well, a year ago, we didn't even have dashboards. So now this, it's still not good enough. And I was like, no, I agreed. It's still not good. You can't release things half baked and then expect people just to love it.
But that's my favorite thing to do.
But it is. And I just thought it was hilarious that he fully acknowledged, well, a year ago, this wasn't even possible. You should just be happy with what you have. And I'm like, it's still not great. What
cool,
I have is
this
not
is
great.
An improvement. This is an improvement over what I had before, but it's still not what I hoped it would be.
Or it's not I think in this case, it's just not helpful. If you can't save the view, what's the point?
A lot of people, I think, would want to do just an ad hoc query, right? And not save it.
I mean, sure.
Sure.
I might want to, at this moment, I want to look and see this data on this list. Okay, that's cool. That's all that I needed that for.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But this was literally the first thing I did was, oh, good. Now I can just modify this view easily and save it.
Yeah.
And then,
Ashley, what's your favorite feature?
I was super underwhelmed. So I don't even know if I have a favorite feature. What I find the most, when you log in, what you see first is how the grid is different. There's this weird gray line in between each record now, and then there's this huge button on the left hand side, which I just think is so distracting from the page. And I know they did it because people didn't know that you could click, and I actually even showed my consultant that you could drag down on the current version and select them all, but you can't do that now on the new one because you have to actually click the buttons. I don't know, I think it's cool that it visually you can see that it's different records. What I do find cool about the new grid is that you can literally just drag over the top of it and then copy and paste that into an Excel file, which I love for myself. I am terrified my salespeople are going to find that out. I'm not going to show them that you can do that, but the whole point is we don't want our salespeople to export their accounts into an Excel document.
They don't have permissions to export to Excel, does it still let them do that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That
does.
seems like a not
Scary,
well
right?
thought out feature.
Yeah, real scary.
Yeah, because if you've
just-
intentionally turned that permission off,
Mhm.
yeah, they won't
Yeah,
find
unless
it.
I haven't. Well, that's what I was saying. Like, I'm just not even gonna show them, not gonna tell them.
Yeah, they won't
And
find
then, well, you'd be shocked.
I
Like,
hope
what my sales
none of
will
them listen to
find.
this podcast.
it.
Yeah, that's actually true. Oh my God. Liz, what about you? What is your favorite thing coming out?
Well, Merlin took mine, and I also felt kind of not super excited about the rest of the thing. So I guess two things that stuck out to me was the enhanced Teams integration. I actually thought of you, Ashley, and the conversation we just had on a previous episode. It doesn't do what you want it to do, but it allows you to like the Outlook app, like it pops out a pane and then you can look at a dynamics record within like a Teams meeting and collaborate on it and like update it there. So I thought that was a nice improvement. And then the other thing, which I haven't seen it actually in action, but is like the enhanced dedupe like merging. So supposedly when you get that dedupe warning message, like you can actually merge the records now from that screen. And they're bringing out lead merging too.
Ooh.
And so again, don't know what it'll actually look like or how it'll work, but I think it sounds promising and something like we've been wanting since the beginning of time.
And now I'm going to take it to the next level. When you can merge a lead and a contact, I'll be real happy.
Yeah, that's
'Cause,
really
like-
asking for too much.
But obviously there's add-on tools that let you do it, but I just I think it's fun. Like that's immediately when you say that, Liz, I'm like, oh, that's not good enough. I now want to be able to merge a lead and a contact.
Yeah, what I really wish, you know how you can do like bulk case merges? I think it's like up to 10 cases. Like I wish we had that for like accounts, contacts, and leads. And I don't think that's what this is, but that's my wish.
Sounds like we should just do like a podcast of like what we wish Dynamics could do.
Be good.
Could. I wish it could make me toast.
Okay.
All right, Marilyn. Well, with that,
So
we're
we are
talking. Oh, go ahead.
go ahead. No,
Liz,
go ahead,
sorry.
Ashley.
I was gonna say, so today we're talking about like how to prioritize rolling out those new features. Like how do you prioritize that above everything else that you, I guess, making toast is Merlin's wish here. So Merlin, tell us, like, how do you prioritize rolling out new features?
I mean, in general, I try to let the need of the business or the process drive which features I'm implementing first. And I think sometimes you've got like that one thing that you wish that you could do, perhaps make toast, perhaps something more related to actual business, where you're waiting for a good way to do it in the system, where you've like checked the roadmap and you know that that feature's coming. And so you're not going to like custom develop something in the meantime. And so when that feature comes out, like you're going to jump right on that feature because that's something you've been looking for. But I sort of, aside from that, I think a lot of the improvements that Microsoft's been adding over the last handful of releases are generally targeted more as quality of life, or like more flexibility, as opposed to like a brand new feature. Like they haven't rolled out anything brand new like PSA since PSA. But now you can edit your view on the fly, or you can put, Canvas apps on model apps. You can put model apps in Canvas apps. You can put model apps in model apps. You can, they keep like adding to this capability. And I think it's a good exercise to periodically re-examine the processes that you already have and see if there's a way that you could streamline that with any of the features that have come out, or that are coming up. Make a plan for that. That's my perspective.
Yeah, I would say I agree as an end user, because like or working at an end user company, I should say, not as a consultant, because I think it's really cool, like watching these waves and like, oh gosh, this would be cool to do. This would be cool to do. But then you go back to your user base and they don't even know how to look up a record. So it's like, what's the point of like adding all these cool new things if they don't know the basics of the system? So it's hard to kind of prove that value like over time, because you're like, oh no, there's releases twice a year that like come out with new features, but then you never actually use any of the opt-in ones. Like obviously like the view one, you can't opt into it. It's that's just there. It changes automatically. So I struggle with that as a part-time admin or a functional or a fractional admin. Is that what you called it, Liz? Fractional admin, which I thought was awesome. As a fractional admin, that's what I struggle the most with, is like how to justify teaching salespeople to use something new and cool and would actually make their lives easier, but it probably makes it harder because they don't even know how to use the basics. So
I agree. Yeah, I was thinking about that too. And I've been doing a lot of like new implementations. So obviously the kind of enhancements you just get are part of it, but like I don't see a lot of clients like in their MVP or like phase one adopting some of the like really new shiny features, or they don't want to pay, like if there's an additional cost to use that functionality, like they aren't willing to pay that right off the start because they just want to kind of get the basics and the core stuff down. So unless it's baked in, I see it just being put off. It makes me wonder too, like if Microsoft has metrics on like the adoption of some of the new features.
Interesting.
they probably do, because remember Kyle, when we were talking about field service, said that he can like keep track of like who's actually using it and how far they've built it out in the comments and stuff. So that's actually a good question, Liz. I'd love to know the answer, but I'm thinking it's probably yes.
Yeah. Or things are for very specific scenarios. And so if the business doesn't have that need or that scenario, like it might work just fine, but it's just that it doesn't meet the requirement. And so you're not going to use it just for the sake of using it. Like something I'm thinking about that's new, but it's been out for a while, or like playbooks. Like I've never actually implemented playbooks because it's just not made sense.
Well, and I feel the same way about forecasting. Like my salespeople complain about like how long it takes to forecast. And I'm like, cool, there's this new forecasting tool. But to like then teach them that their opportunities actually, like they can't just edit it on a spreadsheet, or like to functionally get it to work, or like who needs access, or getting a sales manager to change their like philosophy on being able to like just manipulate the numbers. I mean, like it's hard to convince them that like this will be easier in the long run, but it'll take setup time, you know, to be in the beginning. It's hard to change processes that are like, especially forecasting is a need in the business. Like, how do you change their methodology on that? It's hard.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too. We haven't really talked about the setup time. Like again, if it's something easy just to turn on and it's like flipping a switch, that makes sense. But if it's actually, there's a project around it and there's some time that needs to go into getting it to work and training, obviously, like that's something to consider if the ROI is there.
Yeah, it's true. And I guess thinking about your forecasting scenario, I'm like, well, if I were going to try to convince somebody that this was the best path, like what I'd want to do is set it all up over here in a development environment, and then like show somebody, be like, look at how cool this could be, and like work through the whole process and see how this is better, and like try to convince them that way. Mm-hmm. But then sort of to your point, you have to have the time and availability to do all of that on the side, sort of without anybody asking, in addition to presumably your full-time job that people are asking you to do during the day. So
I know, Ashley, you should just ask the pre-sales person at your consultant to give you a demo of it and convince everyone to use it.
That's hilarious. And that was actually going to bring up my next point, is like, sometimes internally you don't have the capability to actually roll out these features. Now, forecasting, easy example, I've actually done, Merlin, what you're talking about. I actually did the demo environment and kind of just built it out, and came to the point of like, oh my gosh, like if I showed this to anybody, they'd be like, we can't do that because the numbers are going to be like too accurate.
Why don't you want accurate numbers?
Because they like to adjust them after the fact, so it's something they can actually, you know, salespeople don't want to be held accountable to the numbers.
Adjust the number in CRM then.
Oh, yeah, then there's an audit trail.
Yep.
Jeez, Liz, you've been in sales.
You're so naive, Liz.
Yeah, I didn't keep my stuff up to date at all.
Yeah. Apparently, this is why she didn't stay in sales. It's because she doesn't understand how to make herself look better.
Mm-mm. Right.
It's too bad.
Well, and so not only that, then like when you do that demo of like, oh, this is how it could be, they're like, cool. And then you spend all that time implementing it and then they don't use it anyways. That has happened to me. I can't even tell you how many times where like they think it's cool because you demoed it in this perfect little world or environment. And then when you try to apply it to like actual situations, they're like, oh, this is just too difficult. And then you've spent all this time and effort.
Well, and that's where you need like buy-in from the management level, the executive level to be like, yes, let's implement this and we're going to use it. And I feel like maybe in that scenario, actually getting a consultant to do the work for you would be beneficial, because now you've gotten someone to commit to pay a bunch of money to implement this. That might make them less likely to decide that they're not going to use it afterwards. Maybe.
Actually, have you like looked at how much time they waste on manual forecasting and kind of like painted the picture that way?
Not at my current company, but I did do a project like that at a previous company where we actually did implement forecasting into the system because I could justify like the time that it took everybody to like put their opportunities in a spreadsheet and then like add any ones that weren't in Dynamics. And then for like the sales manager to like then copy and paste all of that into one spreadsheet. So yes, I did a time study where all of that was done. And I said, well, for this amount, we can have our partner build forecasting, and even on a scale, you know, where like, hey, this is 20% expected to close. We're only going to realize 20% of the revenue of this deal. And it's harder to do that on an Excel spreadsheet because you have to build all those formulas. So we built forecasting into the system, and, you know, within 3 minutes of updating your opportunities, you could get an updated forecast. So not at the current company, at a previous company we did. And it was pretty slick. I thought it was really cool. But then again, we didn't have Power BI, and the dashboarding part of it kind of sucked. So we still like exported it to Excel and did like pretty graphs, but I would definitely recommend a Power BI at the end of all of that.
Sure.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Well,
But I
now
think
there's some
that's
forecasting in Power BI too.
Gosh, I was gonna say, well, I think that's the hardest part though, is like justifying the time, or like you said, Marilyn, the money spent on a consultant when you don't know how much value it's actually gonna bring in the end, especially if it's something that like just looks cool. And like the forecasting, I mean, that was not a new feature. I guess that wasn't a wave feature. It was a new feature for our system.
Right.
But I think it's hard. How do you guys value like the ROI of it? Or like, how do you justify at the end that it's going to be worth it?
Yeah, I feel like something in what you just said made me think about sort of my frustration with how Microsoft and a lot of their sales field sort of present the Dynamics application is, look at all these cool features. And like, I've even heard this going through like a demo preps with like, you know, the Microsoft sales team and the partner sales team. And you're like, oh, we're going to show this, we're going to show this. And then like somebody's in there is like, well, but like, we need to really add some sizzle. Like, you know, where's the sexy software? And which, as an aside, there's no such thing as actually sexy software, but you know, they want Flash, and what they think of as Flash is show the cool features, show the cool stuff that it can do. But what if the customer doesn't need that stuff? Like, what if it doesn't apply to their business? They're like, or, you know, like, yes, it's cool and it does all this neat stuff, but if there is no real tangible value to the business, if you can't identify like this is going to save somebody time, or this is going to let us make better decisions, or this is going to lead to some sort of tangible outcome, you don't need the feature. Like, what's the point of that feature? And so I think like there is a line there between like seeing a new feature and being like, oh, this is cool and I want to implement it, and realizing if there's actually a purpose, like a reason to implement that feature other than that you as the technology nerd think it's cool.
Okay, two things
I fall into
there, Merlin. Isn't Microsoft Sales supposed to be doing like persona-based, like role-based demos where it wouldn't just be about like the features, and it's supposed to be about the process for the industry?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a day in the life, but check out this cool sizzly stuff in my life.
So the other thing I want to ask then is, do you guys feel like sometimes they add new features just for the demo, like just to give it that sexy appeal? And like they're, especially when they're like the first version and they're half baked, it's like only good for the demo and like selling the software, but like no one's actually going to use it in real life yet.
It's possible.
I'm not
Well,
like, I have no proof of this. I'm just saying like sometimes it feels like that, especially when something's really new.
Well, Merlin, what you were talking about, I think I saw Liz and I like both just dying to jump in, because what I think of is they add all that stuff, but not all of it comes with your licensing. And they don't tell you that in the actual demo, you know, that when you're going through this sales process. And that makes me think of Salesforce. Man, that's why everybody chooses Salesforce, because they do an amazing demo. I can't even tell you how many times I've been in a demo of Salesforce and I'm like, why don't I work with this tool? Like, look at how cool it is. But everything that they show is an add-on, you know, like the Outlook stuff you have to pay more for, the email stuff you have to pay more for, and which is cool, that's fine, but they don't tell you that. And Microsoft, like with the Power BI licensing, they're like, oh, you could probably get away with a free Power BI license, knowing full well you can't for what they're demoing, and things like that. So I think that also comes into the plays, understanding the licensing and how those features will fit into that.
It's just an upsell opportunity, Ashley. Like, oh, you thought you were going to get professional for $65 a month, but you saw this cool assistant stuff that I just showed, all this AI. You're going to need enterprise and also the add-on to get all of that. So I'm sure it's worth it, right?
Yeah,
I don't know.
definitely.
Actually, your Salesforce comment reminds me, like, whenever I used to compete against Salesforce selling, like I'd always say like, oh, there's all these hidden costs, and like Microsoft doesn't have that, which I think back in the day was more true. But to your point, I think the way they've changed licensing, like I don't really think that's a differentiator anymore.
It's not.
I don't think it is.
I'm sure that the answer there was Microsoft saw, and I think that they've actually acquired some, like there's been a lot of cross executive collaboration, like executives from Microsoft go to Salesforce and vice versa.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it'd say, well, this is working for Salesforce, so why don't we do it?
Yeah.
Like they've got the market. If we want to bite into their market share, we should do all the same things that they're doing.
Which is hilarious, because that was a huge differentiator at the time, that you didn't have to pay more for, you know, the features that you got, like your licensing just included it all, right?
Yeah, you
And
kind of
so-
got everything with just one, like the top level license.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I think it's funny to me that they went to that model, when I thought that was like you said, Liz, their huge differentiator. The thing that made them different from Salesforce is you didn't have to worry at the end, like, okay, here's my license, but then to get these like 3 other things, you're gonna have to pay this much more.
Or there's limits on like how, like amounts of things. Like I think, I mean, there's API limits with Flow. There's, you know, for customer voice, like there's how many surveys you can actually, responses you can get back. Like a lot of the stuff that's free also has caps, or like marketing, you know, with that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's interesting that they went that route. I think their response back would be like, there's a lot of new features though. Like when we used to just be kind of one price for everything, like it was a different system, and that we have a lot more functionality these days.
Well, I'm gonna
That
hit
is
you
true.
back on that, Liz, and ask, what of the Optin new features in the past 2 years on all these waves have you actually intentionally went in and opted into, that came with your license, that came with the enterprise or professional licensing? I can tell you mine is 0.
I'm trying to think, and that's why, yeah, that was kind of what I started with, is that like when on a net new implementation, most of the fancy, cool new stuff is not phase 1. And I don't know if they get around to phase 2, because I'm usually on to the next project. And so it's a shame. Like, yeah, if they're paying more for this more robust system, but not using it.
Well, and I've been at my company for almost 2 years now, and I have yet to turn on any of those optional items, because at the end of the day, like if it's not going to enhance or help our end users like complete their job, make us more sales. I mean, at the end of the day, we just want a CRM to help us make more revenue. And if it's not going to help that, like I can't justify turning it on. So I think it's funny that like Microsoft will come back and say, oh, there's no more new features, that's why like these ones cost more money or whatever. But like any of the new ones that come with your licensing, I don't use.
I feel like we've now turned into, how do you prioritize using new features, to we don't use new features.
But so I guess when I think of new features, I don't think of just the ones that Microsoft releases, right? Like I think of like things internally, like the forecasting. At the time, Microsoft didn't have forecasting. So how do I prioritize putting out my own new feature of forecasting versus like waiting for Microsoft to build one? Or
Yeah, so you're saying
needing to
like
do it
some
manually.
configuration or customization work.
Because you're adding on like additional things, or like an email marketing. So if you're adding on like D365 marketing, I think that's a new feature. I don't know. I might have a different perspective on it just because as an admin or as an end user, like anything new is a new feature.
So how do you, if you're like just kind of weighing between projects or initiatives, like how do you prioritize then if there's competing suggestions on what to do next in the system?
I get the group of people together that are asking for all this stuff, and I say, cool, here's what everyone is asking for. You tell me why yours is more important than this other person's. And then they have to do it in front of each other.
How does
Seems
that go?
reasonable.
It actually is. So we haven't had to do it too often at my current company, but this happened a lot at a previous company 2 jobs ago, where we'd get all the executives on a call and be like, this is everything that your team is asking for. And they'd be like, my team's asking for that. Don't like, why is that even important? Or like some people, like an executive would jump on this, the marketing person would always be like, man, I was coming in like guns blazing. My project was most important. Then I hear what everyone else needs. And she's like, I don't even feel like fighting for my stuff now based on like hearing the other needs. So it actually, I enjoy that because I think it really brings like a lot of insight to people of like, hey, you're not like what you're asking for may be important to you, but for the company as a whole, what's actually going to be more important. So I love to get people together like that and have those kinds of conversations because the commentary that just comes out of it is also really entertaining. So that's what I do anyways. I don't like to be the end all be all of making the decisions for Dynamics. Because
the business should totally have a say. Yeah. And it's interesting, like if they don't have the full picture like of everything that's coming in, they might think that theirs is the most important, but just by getting them to like talk and share and understand that they just kind of self deprioritize what they're asking for.
Yeah, because we would do our own like internal releases because we were on premise at the time. And so like we didn't get all these cool new features. So if we wanted new features, we had to build them. And so we would do like 4 releases a year. And we're like, cool, we're going into the first release. We only have this much, we have this much set aside for development hours. What's going to fill that? And then we put like any like t-shirt sizes on stuff. And yeah, it actually worked really, really well.
Did you ever
miss that process now that I'm thinking about it? Like I miss doing that.
You could use it again.
I should. Yeah, I definitely should.
So I wanted to ask, did you ever have a stalemate where like people wouldn't back down and you had competing priorities still? And like, how did you handle that?
The CEO would come in and say, we're going to do this over this. Because at the end, I mean, so she was part of the conversations all the time. I mean, she was always in there giving her input. But if we did come to like people aren't backing down or like, or increase the budget, like maybe, okay, to get both, maybe we need to increase the dev hours for this sprint or something. So those were both options. But yeah, the CEO would come in and make that decision for everybody, which I think is also helpful because she's the one who knows what the direction and where, our money best spent is. So
yeah,
that's the person who should be making that decision. I actually really like that process.
Yeah, I like, it's so funny talking about it now. Like I genuinely miss doing those monthly calls with our executives and being like, all right, battle, like a big Pokemon battle or something, like, all right, throw it out and throw your ball to catch your project. So sorry, weird Pokemon reference. I know my nephews talk about it all the time.
It's okay. It fit. I liked it.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, I really like that a lot. It's right, like you're having the business sort out what's more important to the business, and the best way to do that is to make sure that everybody understands everyone else's context. Because yeah, if you're just like, I'm in marketing and I need these things, like this is my critical thing, and then you hear something out of customer service and you're like, oh, okay, never mind. Like, I'm sorry, like your life right now is terrible and my life is just slightly more difficult than it needs to be. We'll fix you first and we can get to me later. Like that's great.
I think you could do the same with the same or a similar thing, but probably not the same with the new features that Microsoft is coming out with is like, okay, let's look at what all of our opt-in options are and decide, could it help any of the areas of the business? And then do the same thing, you know, like, hey, let's put a t-shirt size on this, or what it would take to implement. How much will it actually impact people? Because, you know, we would rate like the actual impact of making this change, and that kind of stuff. So I think, so I know, I feel like, Liz, you like totally, like, you called us out. Like, we were definitely like, oh my God, we don't use any of these new features. But I mean, other people do. And I think it's important to talk about like how you actually accomplish it. Like, it's, yeah. Make
Yeah.
me feel bad for not using any of the new features. I'm gonna go.
I
turn
know,
it on
I
John
kind of
today.
feel bad too. But again, if the business doesn't want to, like, you can't force that, or if it's just not the right use case. It was making me think about like why they're not being used more often, or maybe we're the exception, our experience, and not the norm.
That would be weird though, if the 3 out of 3 people would be the exception on this. I mean, you
Well,
know what I'm
Merlin
saying? Like,
really
there's-
hasn't chimed in on this part, so
It's true. I haven't said much on this. I
are you
think
using new features on your projects?
or internally.
sometimes, where it makes sense. Like I was actually just thinking about this. I'm like, okay, in a brand new implementation where you're starting from nothing, or you're starting from some ancient system that essentially does nothing, your needs are so foundational that you're not looking at, you know, the relationship cards to pop up and remind you that your opportunity hasn't been touched in 7 days. You're just like, I just need a place that actually has a list of opportunities. That would be a great start, and that would revolutionize my sales process all by itself. So you're starting so basic that you don't need a lot of add-on features. And I was like, okay, but if you've been using the system for a while, so like I'm working with an organization that probably implemented 3.0 and has like upgraded and upgraded and upgraded and moved to the cloud and upgraded and upgraded. And they're not really using the new features either because they're so like stuck in the tracks that they've set, you know, 6 years ago, and haven't like revisited those processes or revitalized those processes. Like I've looked at some of the customer service, like the case management processes that they're using. And I'm like, this is terrible. And if I were redoing this today, I would do it in a totally different way. But because that's the process that they built and that's the process that their users know, like it's a rut in the dirt, and you can't just like pop up out of it and like take a new path without significant kind of change management efforts and like getting everybody on the same page.
Yeah, and even if you're not re-implementing the whole system and you're just redoing case management, it is like a mini kind of re-implementation project, which takes time and effort.
Yeah, I think Merlin just hit everything on the head right there, right? So you think about like, so the company I work for now has always been online, right? They never had an on-prem environment. But if you think of these companies who, you know, they're coming from the on-prem world, or my company's been on it since 2016, 17. So like before the wave kind of thing with the new Optin features and stuff, like you get into a way of like an old school way of building things onto Dynamics. We have so much custom code in our system that I don't even know if the new features would work, because like there's JavaScript on every single form, load, save, everything, close, like it's ridiculous. But that's how you did things 4 or 5 years ago, right? Like we think it's insane now, but 4 or 5 years ago, that was the only way to do some of the stuff that you wanted to have done. And so I honestly don't even know if I could use those new features. And then I also wonder and struggle with like the cost that you just said, like, okay, so like, cool, I want to use this new feature. So maybe I have forecasting built in a different way, or maybe I do an integration this way, but now I want to use Power Automate, or I want to use like the embedded, forecasting. Think about like the time and the money spent to like re-implement something that you already have that's technically working, kind of. It's not great. It's not out of the box. I mean, it's hard to justify. It is. And you have, like, for us specifically, man, all of that JavaScript, like I can't even imagine trying to remove all of that, figure out what it does, and like use a new feature like a business rule or something to like replace it. Like that would be a nightmare.
It'd be a nightmare if you try to do it all at once. But like, I'm going to say 2 contradictory things because they both just occurred to me. And so, and I fully acknowledge that they don't match with each other. To your JavaScript problem, doing like one form, one record type at a time, just clean that one up and then move on to another one. would make that a lot more manageable. You could do it in bite-sized pieces and it'd be perfect. The contradictory
With
thing that I
somebody
was
who
going to
knows
say,
JavaScript. I don't know
Right.
JavaScript.
well, I can refer you to a very nice consultant. On the flip side of that, as I was thinking through this, like with the new features, I feel like maybe the best answer there is you kind of have to hit a critical mass. Like, and I'm thinking back now to this like case management stuff, which I'm pretty sure they haven't changed probably since 2011. And so like all that stuff that came in like 13 and 15 and 16 that enhanced case management, they're not really using any of those features.
So much stuff.
Which makes it like actually worth using cases.
Yeah.
Right. And they're
Because
not
cases
using,
before that were pretty bad.
they were pretty basic.
Yeah.
And like they're not using a knowledge base, probably because the knowledge base at the time was garbage. The knowledge base now could do a lot more stuff. And so they would probably benefit from knowledge base. And so like I could see as individual features are added, like as the knowledge base gets refreshed, you're like, well, that'd be cool, but it's not really enough. And then you're like, okay, well, now we get SLAs, and now we get this, and now we get this, and now we've got the portal, and now you're like, okay, now there's enough. Like maybe now it's the right time to like overhaul our customer service process and go from everything that we were doing to all the cool new stuff that makes our lives a lot easier. And so maybe it's just a matter of kind of critical mass on those new features before you decide like, yep, now there are enough of them to make enough of a fundamental change to this process that we can switch. Go through.
I think Merlin just combated everything Liz, you and I said about like why we don't do new features, but it's true.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes maybe there's just not enough of a justification until Microsoft ends like the cycle of what they're putting out for it. So
do you think companies are like realistically planning for those types of projects too, like on an ongoing basis when they implement the software? Or do you think they think it's more of like a one and done and then kind of low level maintenance? Like I don't know.
I think you see both.
Yeah.
I will tell you like probably the worst project I've ever worked on is we were building out something to do with cases. This is what made me think of it. And they wanted a specific feature. And at the time, in order to do that, you had to do custom code, like a plugin, all this stuff. And then the notes got released for the next wave. And I said, hey, this is coming out in 3 months. Can you wait? And they were like, no. And
are you serious?
Are you sure you can't wait 3 months for Microsoft? Well, they're like, well, we don't know if it's going to do exactly what we want to do and we won't know. And like, it's going to delay our project and blah, blah. And I was like, okay, justifiable point. But if it does do everything you need, yeah, no. So we built it with a plugin and then and I think our project didn't even go until after that new release was out. So
of course not. I mean, things do get pushed. They don't always come out on time. So there is that argument. But yeah, if you see something on the roadmap that you think is going to do what you want it to do, like wait for it.
That is
and evaluate once it comes out. Yeah.
Because if you've lived without it for this long, you can live without it for another, because your release notes come out 3 months, right? Before the wave. So it's like, yeah. Anyways, that's my horror story of like, that's why people don't use the new features, because they feel like they need it sooner.
Yeah. I think to your question about like, do companies plan to maintain it ongoing or not? I see lots of variability there. I think part of that comes into how it was sold to them, like how it was presented to them by Microsoft and or their partner. One of the things that I feel pretty strongly about is encouraging people that like, this is not just a project where you implement a thing and then, all right, you're done like forever. Like this comes back to the whole product idea. Like your CRM solution is a product and you have to maintain it internally like it's a product, and it's going to change and evolve over time. And if you're not accounting for that when you pick it, then you're going to end up 5 years down the road being like, well, my, Microsoft 2016 CRM system isn't doing what I want it to do anymore. So now I'm going to switch to Salesforce. And then I'm not going to do anything to Salesforce for 5 years. And then I'm going to switch back to Dynamics, or I'm going to switch to Sugar, or I'm going to switch to whatever the new hotness is 15 years from now. And you're just going to kind of keep hopping platforms and going through this whole like data migration effort because you're not like maintaining and keeping your system up to date.
And it's not the product's, the software's fault at all. Just
Nope.
how you approach it.
Yeah.
Any other final thoughts?
I guess my only one is don't be afraid of the new features. Like, I know, I feel like on this call, we like did like waves of up and down of like, yeah, let's do it. Oh, no, we don't. Like, oh, no, you should. But like, I would say like, don't be scared to just turn on a bunch of stuff on your
In a sandbox.
in a sandbox environment. Yeah, sorry, I was going to say demo, but that wasn't the right word. So it's a sandbox environment.
You
And
can
just
do a
try it out.
trial too. Or
Yeah, do a
demo or-
trial. Yeah, and try it out and see, because sometimes you don't know until you actually get your hands on it, because the documentation is not always awesome. I will say that. So and
Mhm.
actually turning it on and using it. So yeah, that's, I guess, the only last thing I'd say is like, don't be scared to just look at it or ask your consultant for a demo.
That's actually not a terrible idea. Like, if you don't want to spend the time to set it up and figure it out yourself, call your partner, ask for a demo. Be like, oh, we're really thinking about leveraging whatever. Can you show me a demo? And force your partner to do that learning for you instead.
Absolutely.
And if they won't or can't do that, find a new partner.
Agreed.
Also true.
Yeah.
But don't ask me to do it because I don't want to. Just kidding.
Well, thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Dynamics Hot Dish podcast. For additional content and previous episodes, check out our website at dynamicshotdish.com, follow us on Twitter at dynamicshotdish, and subscribe to our podcast for notifications. Thanks. See you next time.